In today's video, we're going to be using those flowcharts that you've been working with to help you solve equations. So here we are. These, of course, are directions. We have to make sure that we're using a flowchart, and we have these two equations to solve. So here we are in the first one, 7x equals 42. Now, I'm well aware that many of you probably already know the answer to that, but that's good because then you know if you're doing this right or wrong. So, again, we are using flowcharts. Now, you're not going to use flowcharts forever. They are a learning tool to help you understand why equations work the way that they do. So we need to keep that in mind, but it is important that you understand them. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with our variable. We always start with our variable, which is x. Start with the variable, right? And then you're going to tell the story of what happens to that variable. Okay, so when I look at this of course is only a one-step equation, and I say to myself, well, what happens to x? That's my action arrow. I'm explaining what happens to x. So I've got a number next to a variable. I know when they're together like that, it means multiplication. So I know the thing that happens to x is that it's multiplied by 7. And when x is multiplied by 7, that gives us 7x. So there's my flow chart. I've got my input, and that is supposed to say in, and my output. Okay? So we know that 7x is equal to 42. So that means I'm going to be backtracking from 42. And I'm going to place my 42 directly under that 7x because those are equal to each other. And now I need to know what to do to get back to what the x is equal to. So I always ask the same question. It's always the same, whether I'm using a flow chart or whether I'm solving an equation the traditional way. And that question is, what's the opposite? Well, what's the opposite of multiply by 7? Of course, the opposite of that is to divide by 7. So 42 divided by 7, of course, is 6. And that tells me that x is equal to 6. So therefore, that is my answer. Like I said, very conveniently shown in these flowcharts. Okay, on to the next one. The next one is the same process, but this time we're using 2 steps instead of 1. Well, really, you'll go through the steps as you work through the story of the variable. So, as always, I start with the variable. In this case, the variable is y. Now, if I look at this, what is the first thing that happens to y? Well, there it is. It's multiplied by 4. So that's my first action. And then y times 4 equals 4y. Then my next action, what's the next thing that happens to y? You see first it's multiplied by 4, and then we subtract 9. So my next action is minus 9. And that, of course, gives me 4y minus 9. Now, I'm told here that 4y minus 9 is equal to 31. So I'm going to set that up right below because I know that those are equal to each other. I've got 31. Now I'm backtracking, so I need to ask my question. What's the opposite every single time? So in this first one, this first action arrow, as I backtrack, I know that I'm looking at what's the opposite of negative 9 or minus 9. Well, it could be the same, obviously, but the opposite of minus 9 is to add 9. So 31 plus 9, of course, is 40. So now I'm here, and I know if I was solving my equation, those two things would be the same. So, next question, here it is again. What's the opposite? What's the opposite of times 4? Well, of course, I divide by 4. Oh, I really should write that underneath. I don't want to confuse you. I'm sorry about that. It really doesn't make a difference, but we want to keep it consistent. When we go forward, they're written on the top. When we go back, they're written on the bottom. So the opposite of times 4 is divide by 4, and 40 divided by 4 is 10. So here I am, these two line up, and therefore I know that y equals 10.